Hello again, my little conscripts, and welcome to another Mordian Glory video. In today's episode, I want to riff for a while about a big flaw that I've noticed in the competitive Warhammer 40k meta. And what is this big problem, you ask? Well, it seems that no matter what tournament I go to, whether it's large or small, and no matter what faction I play into, they all seem to have the same issue. Their lists are all bling and no basics. Everyone seems obsessed with taking toys over boys, and it leads to a real Achilles heel. And what I want to do in this episode is explore this idea a bit more and maybe try and explain why it's occurring and if it affects every faction equally. And so, without further ado, let's fix bayonets and charge right into this. Attention guardsmen, the Mordian Glory channel is now officially sponsored by Wargames Atlantic. Wargames Atlantic sells fantastic multi-part plastic kits which are perfect for expanding and augmenting your guard army. Not only do you get a very generous amount of models for a very impressive price point, but also they have a bulk buy discount. The more you buy, the bigger you save. And what's even cooler is they've got loads of different designs to choose from. You've got your Bulldogs, which could count as Praetorians. You've got your Legrognards, which could count as Mordians, Kriegers, or Historians. But if you're looking for something a little bit more modern sci-fi, maybe you're a big Aliens fan, then check out their Ura models, which could count as Cadians or Colonial Marines. So if you like what you see, then please click the affiliate link down in the description below. It's a great way of getting yourself some new models and supporting the channel at the same time. A huge thank you to Wargames Atlantic for sponsoring the channel, and now let's get back to the video. So first off, let's just explain what I mean by all bling no basics and toys over boys. It's a pretty simple concept. Everyone seems to be focused on taking big flashy units, pouring their points into a few elite damage dealers, and then just spending the bare minimum that they think they can get away with on, well, what I have called shit munchers in the past. Units which aren't particularly glamorous, but they do a very important job in your army, whether that is screening, holding primary objectives, or doing actions. Take a look at the last few tournament reports that I have done. Every single army has done this. I've played against Necrons who had no action monkeys. It was just a couple of big bricks of Wraiths and some Catan. I went to another tournament and faced exactly the same Necron style list. Not the exact same army list, but same style. Where were the cheap action monkeys? They just weren't present. I played against Custodes. Now, Custodes are obviously a fairly unique one because they are a very elite army. But this was a Custodes army that didn't even have many Custodes in it. There were a couple of tanks, 4 squads of Custodes, and then 2 or 3 squads of Sisters of Silence, and that was it. I played against Marines, where the only non-vital unit was like a single squad of Scouts and a single squad of Intercessors. Everything else was Death Company and Sanguinary Guard. You see it with Death Guard, just like 2 units of Poxwalkers, and everything else is Terminators. Example after example after example of armies really focusing on these elite units, but kind of not putting the love and attention that needs to go into their foundation. I think this is the big problem. It creates a foundation of sand. But why is it a foundation of sand? I mean, surely spending points on high quality, high capability units is exactly the way to go, right? Well, the issue is that these small shit muncher units are doing a very important job. They're holding primary objectives, they're doing actions, they're doing secondaries, and all of those things are what actually fundamentally win you a game of Warhammer 40k 10th edition. There are very few objectives out there for killing stuff. I mean, you've got no prisoners, overwhelming force, and bring it down. Maybe Call the Horde, but Call the Horde is such a non-objective because everyone's taking elite stuff. Maybe that's why. Maybe Call the Horde and everyone is just overcorrecting for it. I don't think it is though. So there's very few objectives that you actually get for killing. So there might be 1 or 2 that I forgot, but there's very few. You mostly get points. You get 50% of all points you can score in a game of 40k from holding primary. And to hold primary, you need good objective control. A lot of these elite units don't have good objective control. And having a lack of OC isn't a big problem if both players go into a fight and they both have a lack of OC. They're both just relying on OC1 elites. But the moment that you go into a fight where you don't have as much objective control, but your opponent has got plenty, it is a massive, massive problem, because you can move your 200-point unit out and put it on an objective, and someone else can take a, 65-point unit of guardsmen, and they only have to get 3 of their models onto the objective to outscore you. Because let's say you've got 5 Terminator or Terminator equivalent, maybe it's 3 Destro than a character, but let's say you've got 5 objective control. If I get 3 battle line of almost any army and put it on that objective, I now control that objective. And I'm doing that for a significant points discount over what you have spent on your unit. But this also goes another way, because let's say you have, let's use Death Guard again as an example. Let's say you've got some Poxwalkers. Great, we're going to sit those Poxwalkers on the objectives. Fantastic. But what happens if that unit of Poxwalkers dies? Your whole plan was to take a unit and stick it on a primary, and then it's just going to sit there the whole game? What, do you think your opponent's not going to do anything to take that objective away? So you lose your Poxwalkers, and now you have a difficult decision to make as the elite player. Do you forego that primary objective, potentially giving up points, which is what wins you the game, or do you take your 200 to 300 point elite damage dealer and relegate it to now doing primary game? Suddenly, you're not saving points on taking cheap objective holders. You are actually spending a huge amount of points on holding those primary. It's almost like the logic is almost inverse to what you would expect it to be. You think, okay, well, I'll spend as few points as possible here because that makes me more efficient. But if someone kicks that crutch out from underneath you, you actually end up being way, way, way less efficient. And this issue has become so prevalent, this flaw in many of the army lists that I face becomes so common that it's actually my go-to plan now to kill the ship munchers. I will prioritize killing ship munchers over killing big scary units. Because if my opponent has got 10 units in his army, but 3 or 4 of them are these objective doers, if I kill them, suddenly he has so few assets to draw upon that any time that he has to do an action, he has to make a difficult choice between scoring points or doing damage. And if he chooses not to score those points, that's a big win for me. And I just want to make something abundantly clear here. This isn't an issue I've just noticed in my local meta. I do travel a fair amount for tournaments up and down the UK, and I've even been to America a few times and played tournaments over there. And it's an issue which I've noticed growing slowly but surely over the course of the end of 9th and all through 10th edition. But in the last 6 months, it really seems to have dialed up to 11. And every army I face is this very elite force. Oh, and to just drill down an extra level into this, which has just occurred to me, not only do these armies have issues like holding objectives because they're so focused on doing damage, but they also have a lack of redundancy. Every unit in the army is covering one job, but when that unit dies, there's nothing else in the list that can efficiently cover that same job. So you have on the surface a list that has everything covered, but the moment that they lose 1 or 2 assets, everything starts to fall apart very quickly. So it's not just a case of a lack of ship munchers and maybe a case of over elite focused. It's also a case of a lack of redundancy and a case of over specialization. So now that we understand what all bling no basics is, and we understand what some of the problems it can cause, I guess the big question is, why is this occurring? Honestly, I don't know the answer for sure, but I can take a few wild guesses as to why I think this is occurring. First up, fundamentally, elite armies tend to be a bit quicker and easier and cheaper to get onto the tabletop. one of the big problems facing Horde armies and battle line is that you have to spend essentially the same pound or dollar value to get a unit which is less points. If you can spend £40 on a box of intercessors, which is going to be worth like 150, 160 points, or you can spend £40 on some big elite unit that's worth 250 points, well, you're going to be tempted to go for that big elite unit. It seems more powerful on paper. When you look at everything through the lens of doing damage, it makes sense to take that unit. And also, it's going to mean that your army costs you less overall. It means it's less for you to have to paint, so you can get playing. So I think there's definitely some real world logistics at play here. I also think, and I kind of mentioned it just a moment ago, that everyone is looking at Warhammer 40k through this lens of doing damage. Whenever you see units being compared online, you see people comparing like how much damage they can do, how many wounds they can do, all this math hammer this, math hammer that. And you have so many people which almost put blind faith in math hammer and statistics to prove that a unit is good or not. Over the years, I personally have come to put very little stock and trade in math hammer. And people always try and convince me that a unit is good or bad based on its points cost or based on its ability to do damage. And math hammer has a place and it is useful, but at best I see it as a rough guide because there's so many other factors at play when you actually get into a game of Warhammer 40k. Math hammer can, I would say at best, get you 50% of the way there. But really, the way that you judge a unit, or whether it's good or not, is how it performs on the tabletop. And that performance doesn't have to be directly linked to damage. A great example of this is Tau Fire Warriors. You ask any Tau player online, what is their best sort of battle line choice? And they're going to say maybe crew, but probably they're going to say breaches. Take breaches, put them in a devilfish, with a card for Fireblade, and this unit can mash it forward, jump out and start smashing stuff. But the reality is that I think breaches are trash. I think they're an absolute trap. Why? Because I'm spending 230 plus points on a unit of battle line to try and get a unit of battle line to do damage, when the job of that battle line unit shouldn't be to do damage. The job of that battle line unit should be to screen out, protect them from deep strikers, do primary objectives. For the cost of one breacher squad, which can do plenty of damage, don't get me wrong, but for the cost of one breacher squad, I can get 3 squads of regular fire warriors. Now, those regular fire warriors probably aren't going to do as much raw damage, but that's 3 units I can put -1 to hit on. That's 3 units that I can screen out with. That's 60 objective control that I have at my fingertips. In that little group of 30 fire warriors, I might have more objective control than my opponent has in the rest of their entire army, and I've only spent just over 10% of my list on that. If you go for a unit like breachers, which on paper look really good and really damaging and fantastic, the issue is that you take your breachers, you yeet them forward, you jump out, they kill something, and then the breachers die, and then they're gone. And because they're so expensive, you've got maybe 1 or 2 units of these things. And so when both those units go, which can easily happen in a single turn, well, that tool is now completely gone from your toolbox. And there's no redundancy built into the list. Another small factor that is probably at play here is rule of cool. Battle line units aren't overly glamorous. A squad of guardsmen is a very necessary tool to have in my toolbox, but it's not as big and imposing and as flashy as, well, a Baneblade. The Baneblade's cool, but it's not as good. And maybe those are 2 very extreme examples. Perhaps we could look at instead something like a platoon of guardsmen versus a Rogal Dawn. That's probably a more common comparison there. Now that platoon of guardsmen, it's going to take me longer to build, longer to paint. It's going to cost me more to do it. And at the end of the day, when I look down on it, it's probably just a bunch of infantry running around. I mean, I love infantry running around, but for a lot of players, they're probably like, yeah, I think I'm going to pick the tank. Easier to build, easier to paint, and looks great on the tabletop. But if I could point to 1 or 2 reasons that I really think have caused this shift in the last 6 months, more than anything else, is it's the nature of how so many 40k armies play. It's easy for me as a guard player to talk about having redundancy and objective control. And it's easy for me to go over to an army like Tau, which play very, very similarly to guard in many ways, and use those as an example. But if we come out of our Guvesa bubble for a moment and look out there, there are a lot of armies which are fundamentally designed from the ground up to work in this elite damage dealing way. And there's also a lot of armies which just do not have the tools available to them in any way, shape or form. I mean, look at the last few armies that have been released. Grey Knights, they've got about 2 data sheets to rub together. Emperor's Children, they barely have anything. They've got like 6 unique units and then a handful of cast-offs from the main Chaos Codex. Death Guard, I think, are doing so well at the moment because they can play the elite game and they actually can have a bit of redundancy. I think a lot of Death Guard players are kind of focused on taking Death Shroud Terminators and whatnot, but I could look at a Death Guard army and very easily guardify it by taking 4 or 5 units of Poxwalkers. That's all it really would take, just to go from the usual 2 to 3 to 5 to 6 units of Poxwalkers. And I think there you go, you've successfully solved this issue for Death Guard. But I think Death Guard can do that, and I don't think Emperor's Children can do that. Look at armies like Imperial Knights, so hot right now. Really, really powerful. But I think they're really powerful because of what they're playing into. Because an Imperial Knight army is very, very elite by nature. Probably one of the most elite armies by nature. So if everyone is playing elite armies and you're trying to out-elite the Imperial Knights, well, of course that's going to go badly. A lot of people have asked me, how do I think I would do with Guard or Tau into Imperial Knights? And I have said I'm not worried about them. I acknowledge that they're very, very powerful. I acknowledge that I could lose some games against them, but I reckon I'd have a good chance of winning games against them because I'm not running an elite army. If I take my Met Guard army into Knights, my entire army is going to have lethal hits against them. I'm not going to be too worried about it. If I take my Tau into Imperial Knights, my entire army is going to have lethal hits against them. Maybe lethal hits is a big part of it, but it's not just the lethal hits. It's the fact that if a Knight goes out onto an objective and, you know, toes onto it, goes, this is mine now, I don't have to send out a bunch of my important stuff to take that objective back off the Knight. I can send out some ship munchers to do that. And if I need to make the first move, I can move out with my ship munchers first. Then when the Knight comes to counter that, I can then counterpunch with my own damage dealers. But if I've only got damage dealers and elite units available to me, then of course Knights are going to be a huge, huge problem. But it's not just these new niche factions like Emperor's Children, which are kind of fundamentally bought because they haven't got everything they need right now. You've also got factions which have been around for a long time, which are starting to feel this pain, feel these issues. And I think that is because 10th edition has been the edition of loss. So much has been taken away. And it's not just Forge World stuff that's been taken away, but so much from codexes has been taken away. The Imperial Guard used to have well over 100 units at its disposal. Now we're down to about 60, 65, including the combat patrol ones. We've just got enough that we need to be able to have all the different tools in the toolbox. But there are many factions out there which just don't. Recently on a live stream, I had a few people ask me to try and guardify different factions like I had done with the Tau, and I immediately started encountering problems when doing that. I was like, okay, well, let's try guardifying something like the Orcs, but they just didn't have the indirect fire options that I wanted. They just were lacking certain things. This is Orcs, an army which should be infinitely flexible, but just isn't. I tried it with Admech and same issue. I just didn't have any good indirect fire to draw upon. I had good infantry, I had good main damage dealers, but I didn't have that sort of third thing that I needed, which was a sprinkling, a seasoning of indirect fire to be able to really guardify that faction. In essence, what I'm trying to say here is, yes, there are a lot of elite armies out there right now. And yes, there does seem to be a bit of a problem with redundancy and all bling, no basics. And I'm sure a lot of that can be laid at the feet of the community and the players and this obsession with damage dealing and looking at things through Math Hammer. But I also think that there's another angle to this, another aspect to this, which is some armies just can't play the redundancy game. Some armies have to be elite. And a lot of armies that previously had everything that they needed now find big gaps in their capabilities. And this is having a direct impact on the meta and on the way that 40k games are being played. Well, at least that's what I think. But of course, all of this is just like my opinion, man. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments section below. Do you think that we do have an over-elite problem in the 40k meta at the moment? Do you think that this will shift over time? And which factions do you think at the moment are struggling the most with this issue? If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to go ahead and smash that like button and also subscribe to never miss an episode. Would you like to know more? If so, then please consider becoming a channel member or patron. By supporting the channel, not only will you be doing your part, but you'll also be helping me create more content for your viewing pleasure and unlocking a whole host of perks. You get everything from a badge next to your name, custom emojis, but the big one is access to the Mordian Glory Discord server, an online community with almost 2,500 active members. It's always popping off in the MG Discord. We've got channels for army lists, hobbying, tactics, stories, and even a pretty spicy meme section as well. For all you greenhorns that wanted to see the Mordian glory hole, today is your lucky day. And joking aside, I do want to say a massive thank you to all of the current channel members and patrons. You guys are amazing. Truly the lifeblood of the channel. I could not do Mordian Glory full-time without the incredible and generous support of my members. So thank you guys so much. And last but certainly not least, I want to say a personal thank you to all of my top tier Patreons. These are the War Masters, the people who have truly gone above and beyond the call of duty. So a heartfelt thank you to Redfield, 32, Jurgens, Miasma, Try Again, Bragg, RJ, Scorpion, Bonbon Vert, Lord Pryor, Nicholas Walsh, John Stubbs, Guardian, Varney, Sword, Fish Trombone, Picklock the Forged. Seriously guys, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your support is incredible and it makes a huge difference. Thank you so much. That's all for now. Hope you've all enjoyed today's video, and of course, as always, see you guys next time.